Visualization tool, I'm going to briefly talk about Vagrant. And Vagrant, as I've recently discovered, is a convenient way to create and manage virtual machines. It sits on top of VirtualBox, which must also be installed, although I think you could use other virtualization tools with Vagrant instead of VirtualBox. With VirtualBox, as I showed in the previous video, I was creating a full graphical Linux environment. With Vagrant, the default operating mode is that you are going to create what are called headless virtual machines. That is, machines that do not have the graphical interface defined with it. And the reason for that is the Vagrant developers assume you want to use your own host computer as much as possible. And so it'll set up this Linux or whatever environment for you, use shared folders that you can read and write from both your host and your guest computer. And that allows you to use your favorite editor that you already have installed on your host machine, your web browser on your host machine, etc. So if we have Vagrant installed, it's really quite simple to get started. You go to a directory where you want your files to be stored, and you simply execute the system command vagrant init, so for initialize a virtual machine, and then you specify what virtual machine you want to build. In this case, I'm specifying that I'm going to build an Ubuntu Trusty 64, which is the 14.04 release of Ubuntu. When that's done, all that Vagrant does is it creates a Vagrant file in the directory, and this Vagrant file is how we're going to specify how the virtual machine will be built. And so if we look at what was created, I have my notebook that I'm working with right now, I have my IPython notebook checkpoints, and I have this Vagrant file. So let's look at what's inside of that. So it's a fairly long file, most of which is commented out, and it is a Ruby file. So Vagrant is written in Ruby, and so to the extent that you understand Ruby, the files may be less cryptic to start with, but there's no need to know Ruby to use Vagrant. So here it's saying what the virtual machine is going to be. It's going to be this Ubuntu 64. Most of these things are commented out, and they're examples of what I can uncomment and modify if I want. So if I want to change the kind of ports, I can forward ports. I can uncomment this line, and I'd have a forwarded port that on the guest would be 80, and on the host gets mapped to 8080. So that would be useful for just simple HTTP forwarding. Different configurations for the networking that you want to set up, etc. I can specify how much memory the machine is going to use here, so forth. Okay, so like I said, it's written in Ruby, it's cross-platform, the file doesn't need to change and run on Windows, Mac, or Linux. It's a text file that's intended to be put under version control. So if I do make changes to it, I can commit those changes to Git, Subversion, Mercurial, whatever the version control tool I'm using, and both use that to share and to roll back and get different states of the machine. Okay, so what do I need to do now to bring up the box? In this shell, we run the command vagrant up. Now, the first time this runs, this might be kind of slow, because if you have not already downloaded the image file that is going to be used for that virtual machine, Vagrant has to go to the Vagrant repository on the web and pull it down. And this file will likely be on the order of hundreds of megabytes to a few gigabytes. So it's bringing it up with VirtualBox, setting these various things. It's setting a port forwarding so that I can SSH to it. Then it tells me that the machine is booted and ready to connect. So if I come down here in this shell and I I do VMs, and I do the Vagrant, let's see, Vagrant status to see if the machine is running. Okay, so the virtual machine is already running. So now I can SSH to the machine. And see now, well, let me exit this. See right now, I'm on my users, Brian, documents, blah, blah, blah. So this is on my host machine. If I ask who am I, which is a Linux Unix command, it tells me I'm Brian. If I SSH to the Vagrant machine, if I see where I am, I'm now in home Vagrant. If I ask who am I, I'm Vagrant. And I'm now in this Ubuntu machine and not in my Linux machine. There is a shared folder. The shared folder, and you can have more than one shared folder, but by default, Vagrant creates a shared folder that's mounted in the guest /Vagrant, and it is simply the directory that Vagrant is being run from. So now I have my Vagrant file, a provision.sh file I'll talk about in a little bit, the different notebooks that I've already created, VirtualBox, IPYNB, Working with Vagrant, etc. All right, well, let's come back here. And so all we did to this point was create a simple Ubuntu virtual machine with whatever kind of the default installation of tools that the Vagrant people have created for it. The real power of tools like Vagrant is to be able to create machines with a customizable and repeatable computing environment. And this is referred to as provisioning. So there are several ways that you can provision with Vagrant. I've listed here Shell, Chef, and Puppet. Chef and Puppet are commercial tools for provisioning in general across a variety of virtualization tools. You can also use Docker, and I may get a Docker notebook up later in the week. So the idea here is we modify our Vagrant file so that we tell it we're going to do some provisioning. And so here I'm just opening up again the modified Vagrant file and scroll down here to what I've changed. And this line right here where I'm going to tell that I'm going to configure the virtual machine with some provisioning, and the format I'm going to use is the shell commands, and then this path tells me what shell file I'm going to use. I can also do this with inlines, for just simple lines within the file. And so let's look at the provisioning file. And in this case, I'm just running, these are Ubuntu commands, apt-get update, which is going to update my repository information. And then I'm going to install the Apache web server. And the -y, just by default, the apt-get install is going to ask me yes or no if I want to continue. So I'm just telling it to automatically say yes to it. Now this is a very simple provisioning. I can have quite extensive provisioning tools. So here's an example for another project I'm working on. And I first check to see if I've already done the provisioning. And that's by, I'll show you at the end of the script, I create a file in /var/vagrant provision. If that exists, then I exit and I don't run things. I'm setting an environment variable which tells Ubuntu or Debian to be non-interactive. And so when I install, for instance, my SQL Server, it doesn't stop my installation and interactively prompt me for a password for the MySQL root. I do the same thing. I update the repository information, I update my distribution, and then I start installing various tools. And after I've installed Apache 2, which you see I forgot to do my -y here, I set a read-write mode for Apache. I'm installing PHP, various tools, MySQL, Subversion, Git, Python, etc. And then I'm modifying here, I'm going to be modifying my Apache configuration file. And then when I've done all that, then I create by touching this Vagrant provision file so that when I bring the machine up again, it doesn't go through all these steps. And that's the basic gist of Vagrant. There's a lot of other tools and options that you can use with this. You can set up private networks that virtual machines communicate with each other but cannot be reached by outside networks. You can, like I said, change how much memory you're using. You can create virtual machines that get brought up and brought down together so that one Vagrant file is controlling multiple machines. And this is a very nice, lightweight way to extend the computational capacity or flexibility of your own computer.